What makes Izzet Spells a Tier 1 limited archetype, and which cards signal it's open during draft?
Welcome to the MTG Rebellion. Four star back here with you, your lead drafter through the wilds of Eldraine. Let's take a quick look at the draft metagame going into week 8 of Wilds of Eldraine Limited.
Alrighty, so we've got the same tiers as last week. What does that mean for draft right now?
Realistically, we are so close towards the end of the format that the archetypes have pretty much been established and there's not much shifting in it anymore. Depending on how crazy you want to go down the Sam Black hole, you can start playing things like food fights and things like that, but those are more off the beaten path. But established decks are set, everyone knows what they are, and you just try and draft one of them and win.
Fair enough. Let's put a minute on the clock and let's talk about the Izzet Spells archetype and cover that in depth.
You bet. So, just a quick overview here on the Izzet archetype. Realistically, the overview is do not be in a hurry. Your deck is going to have amazing cards on it that are built to go for the long game. Your threats are going to be adventure proof, so you're going to be able to overwhelm your opponent over time. As we start in here with the blue top commons, a lot of the adventure cards are ideal in this archetype. Drawing cards, countering spells, card selection, and just seeing more cards than your opponent will allow you to be able to adjust on the fly. And you don't have to worry about trying to win the game before they draw their bomb. You'll just deal with the bomb whenever it shows up, which is a great place to be. The highlights here, the Transmuter. Curses are amazing in this format. I've played a lot of green Hamlet Gluttons, and it feels the worst to ever have that thing cursed. You have no way to get around it, and your best threat just gets nullified.
So, honestly, Forrester, are we at all concerned that at least three of those commons overlap with Dimir Fairies? I mean, we have Threadbind Click, we've got Picklock Prankster, we've got a lot of different fairies that are in blue, and we see the overlap. Is that a concern?
No, not really, because there are just so many of them, and they're almost interchangeable. If you have more of the Balluna gatekeepers versus the Oracle's attendants, you can function accordingly based on which ones you open. And just the fact that so many of the decks are all these cards are playable, and a lot of them, you're going to be fighting more over the red cards than a lot of the blue ones. The blue-green decks and the other blue-based decks, like Azorius, are not really that strong, so you're not going to be fighting over them as early as you think you would. So no, it's not a problem at all, really.
Well, let's move on to the uncommons here. We talked about just their Picklock Prankster and Threadbind Click, and they are right here for you to
Mhm.
talk about now.
They are. Picklock Prankster is a lot better than anyone ever thought it was. Just being able to get value from it, like I said prior, adventure creatures that generate an effect on the front end and just show up later that have to be dealt with. You overwhelm your opponent's resources. Bitter Chill is literally one of the best removal spells in the format. It just stops whatever they have, and if they ever decide to sack off the critter, or you can bounce it for value, or just kill it in general, you get a scry out of the deal as well. Splashy Spellcaster, Chancellor of the Tales, all on the adventure themes as well. Gadwig's First Duel, really, this is the best deck you want it in, because you have effective spells, removal spells, bounce spells at 3 or less that you can get the double effect. A lot of the other decks that try and play it just can't do it. Frolicking Familiar, lost to this card quite often playing Boros. Like I said, X1s are bad in this format. This is a main reason why.
Fair. Now, if you had to pick the strongest of these uncommons for Izzet Spells, which one would you choose and why?
Sure. The best one for the uncommon spot in Is It Spells really are the adventure things, the pranksters, some of the removal spells. You really, again, it fluctuates between them, but they're all good. And you just have the widest card pool to pick from to make your deck okay. Even if you don't get the best ones, your deck can still be a 5, as opposed to any of the other decks like Selesnya or Simic. If you don't get the payoff uncommons like the ramp spells, your deck is just bad. So is it gives you a wide range of endings that
Options.
could be good or bad, options as well. So you're not just dead if you don't get the cards you need right off the bat.
Fair. Well, moving on to the rares, we've only got 6 of them here, but these are the top.
You bet. The blue rares are really the biggest reason to play them. Every single one of these is outstanding. Sleep Curse Fairy is good in a lot of formats, not just limited. The Prodigy, whenever it sticks and isn't killed on the spot, you just draw cards until the game ends. It Extraordinary Journey, I didn't like initially, but after getting beaten by it a few times, this card is outstanding. I did not read it correctly. It triggers off both players. So when your opponents cast their spells off of Adventure, you also draw a card. Twinning Twins, a 4/4 flying vigilance. The ward 1 actually matters a lot more than you think because a lot of the higher removal spells like Shadow the Oath, they can't do it until turn 6, and that matters a lot. Talion's Messenger, again, is just good in any deck that can play blue. The Whale is just great, period. A 6/6 that can randomly, again, have an early adventure, and then later it just comes down to 6/6 that's hard to remove.
Fair. Now, with the Twining Twins, are we at all concerned about not being able to splash wide? Do we splash wide? Do we get those like Crystal Grottos?
Absolutely not. I'm not worried about splashing it. I'm playing it straight up on its stats alone. A 4/4 for 4 that flies with ward is good enough on a bad day. If you happen to have a free splash on a grotto, great. If you're blue white, I'm sorry, you don't really want to be in that archetype, but you could get value out of it. Not a lot of the blue cards have a lot of value to be blinked, so it's not really what I'm looking to do.
Fair. Now, there are some cards we need to avoid. This is part one of that list.
Part one, unfortunately, the reason why everyone thought blue was so bad to begin with is because this list is long. You've got a lot of brick rares. Farsight Ritual is just a bad sleight of hand in my view. Disdainful Stroke is a limited counterspell. I'd rather play an Ice Out that is a multifunctional counterspell. Succumb to the Cold is really only good in the blue-white decks. Like I said, blue-red, you're not trying to be aggressive. You're trying to take your time. So tempo doesn't really matter as much. The Elusive Otter, it's more of a green splash card. If anything, a 1/1 prowess in this format doesn't do anything. The blue Virtue, this is the worst of all of them. I wouldn't even bother looking at this. Asinine Antics can be a blowout, but literally I played over 500 games of this format and I've only lost to this card once. And it was with a bad green-white deck that had no interaction, where my blocks just got cursed at instant speed and I got my entire board blown out. Other than that, avoid these.
So, when you're looking at the Izzet spell deck, why is Asinine Antics a poor choice for you to play?
Realistically, because I'm not going to have a big enough board where we're going to be just staring at each other and then running into a big combat step where I can get the value out of it. I don't want to hold up 5-6 mana to flash this in an instant speed to kill one creature. That's not where I want to be. I want to be using my answers like torches and frantic firebolts and mana efficient spells to answer your bigger threats. I want to answer your 6 with a 2 or a 3.
Fair. Let's move on to part two on this list and see what we got.
You bet. So these ones, again, the Snaremaster Sprite really isn't that terrible in the Fairies deck, but the Fairies deck is a lot more aggressive. Like the Coral Smith really does not have value. It is a generic card in this format. Freeze in place, again, the blue-white tap deck. Water Wings, it's kind of like Titanic Growth. If your opponents are playing this, you're going to win more often than not. Misleading Motes, the Grip, this is a reprint of Griptide. Griptide used to be very, very good, but this is not the format for it. So many of the bigger threats, like Hamlet Gluttons, have effects when they come back. And again, we're not a tempo deck really in this format. Stormkeld Prowler is a lot better in the blue-green decks where your density of 5 and 6 mana spells is a lot higher, so this guy can trigger over and over again. Blue-red just doesn't have the velocity of cards to trigger this more than once or twice. The Sprite really could be off this list, but only in the Fairy deck.
So, out of curiosity, looking at Misleading Modes, like you said, it's kind of a functional reprint of Griptide. Have we achieved an era of Magic where there's so many ETB effects that cards like this are just going to get weaker and weaker?
I think we have really, and that's just a Wizards thing. All the cards that they're printing now all have ETB effects, or they're so powerful that it doesn't really matter by the time you're able to tempo them out with the spell that you're really going to pull that far ahead. You've got Incinerates for 1 mana now. You've got better cards than this, so this just gets pushed to the bench.
Fair. Let's hop on over, talk about red commons.
You bet. So red, again, is I think the best color in this format, so there's a lot of overlap. Torch the Tower is insane. Frantic Firebolt, this is what I wanted to point out here. This is the chase common that you want as many as you can get in this format. I would play 8 in my deck if I could, because they all scale on themselves. And there's so many of your cards. All your creatures have adventures. All of your spells are obviously spells. So this thing can scale to 6, 7, 8, 9 damage for 3 mana at instant speed. Outstanding. Cut In is just a solid removal spell, but again, you're not really a tempo deck. You can play a backdoor tempo deck in it, but this is just a generic removal spell for it. And then all of your critters are just value. Edgewall Pack makes a rat. Crabby Giant will let you outdraw them in the later game. Unruly Catapult. This is a deck where you can actually untap it 5, 6, 7 times a game and do 10 damage. Witch's Mark, another sifting card. Skewer Slinger blocks early and stays alive. Redcap Thief value. And Flick a Coin. This is the deck you wanted in.
So you said earlier, Frantic Firebolt, you take 8 copies if you could. Would you take more, though? Would you take 12?
Probably not 12, just because I need room to actually win the game, with whatever I have, because I can't target your face with it. So probably 8 is where I would draw the line, and I would just have those as all of my removal spells and just win the game with whatever is left in play.
Fair. Let's move on to the red uncommons here.
Yep, red uncommons. Again, these are the ones. Imidane's Recruiter. If you're playing red or white, put the card in your deck. It's a great card, period. Witchstalker Frenzy. Again, if you're being defensive, this is a cheaper removal spell as well. Stone Splitter Bolt. Again, kill things that you have to. You're going to have a lot of incidental curses and things later to bargain it for cheap value. Two-Headed Hunter. Just a solid way to win the game. Belligerent of the Ball. A 3/3 for 3 is fine. You could randomly trigger it, but you're not going to be aggressive. Hearth Elemental really shines in this kind of deck because you are slinging spells every turn. So this thing is going to draw your hand back. And realistically, you don't have to cast the Stroke of Genius part. You just cast this card, make it a 1 or 2 mana 4/5. It's a great creature.
So looking at Belligerent of the Ball in particular, is it strong enough in a non-celebration based archetype like Izzet Spells?
It can be, because it's a X3 that can block for 3 mana. It's above on rate, so it is a playable card that you will play. Skewer Slinger does its best impression, but it also has reach, so you might play the Skewer Slinger, but it made the list just because it's still a good card.
Fair. Well, let's head over to red rares here and take a look.
Yep, these red rares are absolutely bonkers. The Realm Scorcher Hellkite is just great. If you've ever cast this off of Hatching Plans, you feel like you're cheating. Decadent Dragon is an army in a can. It's amazing. They have to kill it on sight. The Scalding Viper, this is one of the decks where you can actually get both halves of value on it. Being able to return a permanent early on, just like another Gatekeeper, and then being able to randomly play it early to just get 3 or 4 ping damage out of it in the game. 4/4s for 4 are fine. Like I said, they're able to block early, and then you can attack whenever you feel like it. Godric is good enough on its own. The Song, it's kind of like a Fireball. It's not one I really want in this deck, but it's still a good finisher. Charming Scoundrel, it's an early play. You can most likely use it for a treasure ramp in this deck. And the Redcap Gutter Dweller, again, is just a great card. It's a kill on sight rare, so the red cards kind of go in almost any deck you can play red in.
So looking at that list with Song of Totentons, is it ever worth passing that to signal that you're just trying to shove them into Rakdos Rats?
Realistically, yes. That is the rare that I'm probably going to pass, and I have passed more often than not in this format. There's not really many decks where you can get full maximum value out of it, and if there's a Frantic Firebolt, I'm passing that to my opponent.
Fair. Let's go to the cards you don't want to see in red, starting here.
You bet. Unfortunately, this list is pretty long too. Like I said, we are not aggressive. So the Monstrous Rages, the Threaten Effects, the Food Fights, the Tattered Ratters, all these cards that have synergies in other decks. The Rat deck, the 4-Power Matters deck, the Boros Aggressive Casts Multiple Spells in a Turn deck. None of these cards really are good. Skewer Slinger passes all of these on the list, and it's first to go in the game. Rotisserie Elemental, I'm not blocking really with this card ever, and I don't want to be attacking for 1 menace. It's not going to do anything for the value, and I've got spells in my hand that I don't really want to pitch to try and get value out of it. Kellen, not really that great either. Corvald, the Noble Thief, I've never really been a fan of this card. You could play it, but only if you've got 5 or 6 Firebolts and the board is clear, so you can win the game with their cards instead of yours. Virtue of Courage, second worst virtue in the set. A Shock for 2 mana. I'm going to be doing 8 damage with my Firebolts. Not interested in this whatsoever.
Fair. Fair. Now I could ask why Monstrous Rage is a poor decision, but you covered it a little bit earlier there. It's just a tempo play, and we are not a tempo deck. So let's move right along to the second part of this list and talk about the last of the cards we don't want to see.
You bet. Again, aggressive cards, not really where you want to be. That's not what our deck is trying to do. Bescope Battle Guard, Spear Guard, Merry Bards, Grand Ball Guest, Bellowing Bruiser, all aggressive cards. Gnawing, Crescendo, probably the worst it could ever possibly be in this deck. We're not attacking with things that odds are they're going to be blocking with anyway. Pumping our flyers isn't going to shave a turn off anyway. Bellowing Bruiser, maybe you could play it if you literally have no other way to win the game. Minecart Daredevil, we have no value for a pump that is small like that and a 2-power blocker. Not where you want to be.
Fair. Now, which of these 7 cards would you play as your 23rd card, like your final choice, if you didn't get everything you needed from the draft?
Probably a Bellowing Bruiser, just being able to haste a threat, or maybe double falter flying blockers, so I can get through with my Oracle's Attendants or things of that nature. The only reason why I would even consider it is because it has a 4 toughness.
Fair. Fair. Well, we're going to go ahead and move it right along here. We've got multicolor lands and artifacts.
You bet. Apprentice Folly. We finally have a deck we can play this in outside of the 5-color generic things that really never ever work. Apprentice Folly, you have to have a way to bargain this. That's what I'm going to warn everybody about. Because at the end on Chapter 3, all of the value and reflections that you make all go away. But if you can get 2 clones out of this, you get a clone, probably your best thing. It's not legendary, so you can double up on it as well. They also have haste, you can get value attacking with them, and then bargain this off before you get to Chapter 3. Once you make 2 clones, sack it to a Diviner Witch, to a Torch the Tower, anything to keep that value. You just overwhelm. Collector's Vault, again, we're slow and we want card selection. And being randomly able to generate tokens over time. If you've got a lot of random spells, you can throw extra land so you don't flood. Seer, generic 3/1. Prophetic Prism, awesome in this, allows any kind of splash you'd want. Johan, if this thing sticks, you're going to win the game in short order.
So we didn't cover the last one there, but why do you like the Soul Cauldron of Agatha so much in this list?
The Soul Cauldron literally can go in any deck. It's very good to shut off graveyard synergies of your opponents, being able to eat cards out so they can't raise them back with Headless Horsemen or anything of that nature. As well, just being able to get activated abilities on generic things. A lot of the blue and red creatures, you randomly could get some value out of it, but it's just a good card. It's not ideal in this deck, like I said, but it is a card that you would consider playing of the artifacts in the format. But a Prophetic Prism is probably going to take priority, but in real life, obviously take it. It's a $45 rare, so go on from there, but take it as it is.
Fair enough. Let's head over to the ones we need to avoid and talk about those.
You bet. So again, aggressive cards are not where you want to be. Gingerbrute, it attacks, but we're not going to be committing our mana every turn. We want to hold up our mana for interactive counter spells and removal spells. A Threaten Apple, again, nowhere where you want to be. There is a possibility if you have 4 or 5 Torch the Towers, you could play this card to steal their threat and then throw it and sacrifice it to a bargain to kill one of their guys. Ironcrag, we're not looking to mana ramp in our deck. 3 Bowls of Porridge, maybe you could play it, but again, it's not. This would be in the 23rd card category. It's not something I want to play. It's a little slow. Crystal Grotto, again, if you have a reason to splash, play it. If not, you do have a lot of double red, double blue mana costs, so I don't want to really mess with my mana base like that. Candy Trail may come off of this list eventually, but it was put here to begin with just because if we have better cards, this card is first off of the bench to be replaced.
Fair, fair. Now, does the analysis of Gingerbrute change at all if we have a Dragon Mantle?
No. Dragon Mantle is a card that we started to play. If you have been watching this channel for a while, you and I did pretty well with our first deck with Dragon Mantle on the Gingy, but we were aggressive in that deck. There's a lot, and now with all the X1 hate, you are asking to be blown out trying to Dragon Mantle with Gingerbrute unless you do it early, and then at that point, you're basically just committing to it, and I don't really want to be attacking with this deck. I want to react to what my opponent is doing and win the game once I've gained control.
Fair. Now let's get into the signposts that tell you this archetype is open.
You bet. The first thing, as soon as I see this card, my mind immediately goes to is the Frolicking Familiar. Just like Frantic Firebolt, I wouldn't play 8 of these, but I would play 4 or 5 easily. This is a built-in one damage hedge, so you will not get blown out by the aggressive Boros draws with the Armory Mice or Ginger Brutes, things like that. And then later, you just get free pumps almost every turn out of this thing. Tenacious Tome Seeker is the best way to get back your Frantic Firebolts, get back your Torch the Towers, get back your other amazing spells. Unruly Catapult, it blocks, and remember everyone, this is an artifact. You can bargain this, so you can tap it, then cast a spell with bargain and get value out of that as well. Quick Study, probably the only deck I'd ever want this in, just to be able to keep my cards flowing. Johann, casting spells off the top of your deck is very good, and a 4-mana X5 blocks literally everything in this format. Spellcaster, Duel, Sprite, Stopgap, all amazing cards to play on curve, and if they live, you get value.
So now to that list, is there one of those that just says, this is it, go all in on Izzet spells, like the gates are down, doors open, let's go?
If you get a Frolicking Familiar after pick 5, yes, the gate is wide open, run through it as fast as you can and start snapping up the Firebolts. The advantage that a lot of the Boros decks, the black-red decks, they're not prioritizing the Frantic Firebolts for the removal spells. They want the cut-ins, the Candy Grapples, the Torch the Towers. So you might be fighting over those, but you can get 2 to 3 Frantic Firebolts almost for free, picks 5 through 10, which is kind of silly that happens, but you're set up to abuse the card more than anybody else is.
Fair. And that concludes our Izzet Spells draft guide. Comment below and let us know your thoughts. And while you're down there, please remember to like, subscribe, and share us with your friends. We even have a join button for those who can afford to support the Rebellion with just 99 cents a month. Tune in next week as we near the end of Eldraine and the beginning of speculating on limited viability for spoiled Ixalan cards.
Take care, everybody. I can't wait to do the spoilers. It's going to be a blast.
And until next time, untap, upkeep, resist.